What if I told you that for the very first time in the final saga, Oda has made Luffy look completely powerless? Not tired, not struggling, not pushed to his limit, completely helpless. The man who defeated Kaido. The man who awakened the legendary sun god Nika. The man destined to become the Pirate King is now hanging on the edge of death, and the person responsible isn't Kaido. It isn't Blackbeard. It isn't even the Five Elders. It's the true ruler of the world, IMU. But that's not even the craziest part, because this chapter finally reveals something we've been theorizing about for years. The mysterious weapons surrounding the empty throne, their true purpose, Shanks' shocking warning, and a legendary pirate making one of the greatest entrances in modern One Piece. Trust me, by the end of this chapter, you're going to look at IMU in a completely different way, so grab your straw hats because Oda has just delivered another masterpiece. Let's dive right in. The title of One Piece, Chapter 1189, is King of the World. And honestly, this title alone tells us everything we need to know. Throughout the entire story, we've heard countless titles. The world's strongest swordsman, the world's strongest creature, the strongest man in the world, Pirate King, Fleet Admiral, Yonko. But there has only ever been one individual worthy of being called the King of the World, and that's IMU. Not the Gorosei, not the Celestial Dragons, not even the empty throne itself. This title is Oda openly reminding us that the person standing before Luffy isn't just another villain. He's the one who's secretly ruled the world for over 800 years, and if that's the title Oda chose, then you already know this chapter is going to be insane. Before all the madness begins, Oda gives us one of those classic One Piece cover pages that instantly reminds us why we love the Straw Hats. We see Nami absolutely scolding Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, and somehow, the monster trio ends up looking like obedient little monkeys. Honestly, this joke never gets old. The future Pirate King, the world's strongest swordsman's future rival, and the man with Germa's enhanced body, all become completely helpless the moment Nami gets angry. Maybe the fandom has been right all along. Forget Haki, forget devil fruits. Nami's anger is the strongest power in One Piece. Enjoy this wholesome moment, because Oda is about to throw us into one of the darkest chapters we've seen in years. Now let's talk about what everyone has been waiting for. IMU. Because after reading these spoilers, one thing becomes crystal clear. Oda isn't trying to show us a fight anymore. He's showing us absolute domination. Remember how chapter 1188 ended? Luffy had already taken devastating damage. His body was covered in blood. Most of us believed chapter 1189 would finally be the beginning of Luffy's comeback. Maybe Gear 5 would awaken even further. Maybe someone would interfere. Maybe we'd finally see IMU pushed back. Instead, Oda completely destroys those expectations. IMU calmly summons another divine weapon, the Sea God Sword. Just hearing that name sends chills down your spine. We've already seen IMU using mysterious weapons before, including the terrifying Void Sword. And now, another legendary weapon appears. Without even giving Luffy a chance to recover, IMU drives the Sea God Sword straight through him, again. And then using both divine swords together, he pins Luffy against a massive tree, leaving him completely unable to move. Just stop for a second and picture that panel. The Sun God, the warrior of liberation, the symbol of hope. Literally nailed to a tree, bleeding, unable to fight back. That isn't just physical pain. It's psychological warfare. It's IMU sending a message to everyone watching. This is what happens when you challenge the King of the World. And here's something that makes this reveal even crazier. Think about every single weapon IMU has shown us so far. Each one has a completely different name. Each one carries an almost mythical presence. The Void Sword, the Sea God Sword. Every single weapon feels like it belongs to a forgotten era. An era that existed long before the current world, which immediately raises another question. Exactly how many weapons does IMU possess at this point? He doesn't even feel like a swordsman anymore. He feels like an entire ancient armory walking across the battlefield. Every time he reaches out his hand, another legendary weapon appears, and every new weapon completely changes the battlefield. That's terrifying. Because if this is only the beginning, what happens when IMU finally reveals everything he's hiding? But here's the detail that absolutely blew my mind. According to the spoilers, these aren't ordinary weapons at all. They once belonged to the 19 kings, who founded the world government over 800 years ago. Read that again. The founders of the world government, the rulers whose names shaped history itself, their weapons are now in IMU's possession. Suddenly, those mysterious swords surrounding the empty throne make perfect sense. Remember when Oda first showed us that room? Fans immediately started asking, why are there so many swords surrounding the throne? Were they simply decorations? Were they symbols of peace? Or were they hiding something much bigger? Now we finally have our answer. Those swords weren't placed there by accident. They belonged to the 19 kings who supposedly stood as equals. Yet somehow, every single one of their weapons ended up with IMU, which raises one terrifying possibility. Did they willingly surrender those weapons, or were they forced to? Because if IMU truly betrayed the founders, then those swords aren't symbols of unity. They're trophies. 800 years of absolute victory, displayed around the empty throne for anyone who dares to look. And honestly, that's one of the coldest details Oda has ever written. Now, while Luffy is suffering one of the worst beatings of his entire journey, something unexpected happens somewhere else. Usopp suddenly freezes. He senses that something is terribly wrong. Now wait just a second. Did Oda really just do that? Out of every Straw Hat, the first one to react is Usopp? Not Zoro? Not Sanji? Not Jinbe? Not even someone like Robin Usopp? Could this finally be the observation haki upgrade that fans have been waiting years to see? Remember Dressrosa? That incredible sniper shot, where Usopp awakened observation haki for the very first time. Since then, Oda hasn't really expanded on it. But what if this is the moment? What if Usopp isn't simply worried? What if he's actually sensing Luffy's life force fading away, if that's true? Then Oda could finally be preparing Usopp for the massive role many fans believe he'll play in the final saga. And let's be honest, if the Usopp agenda comes back, the entire One Piece community is going to explode. Now, while everyone is focused on Luffy's desperate situation, Oda quietly drops another development that could become incredibly important in the next few chapters. Gunko's ice finally melts. After being trapped inside that frozen prison, she finally regains consciousness. At first glance, this might not seem like a huge moment, but if you've been following the final saga carefully, you already know Oda never wakes up an important character without a reason. The real question isn't, is Gunko awake? The real question is, whose side will she choose? Because that's where things become incredibly complicated. We've already seen hints that the Holy Knights don't enjoy complete freedom. Instead, they appear to be bound by a mysterious contract with IMU himself. A contract so absolute that even if they wanted to rebel, they simply couldn't. Think back to King Harold. The spoilers strongly suggest that even he couldn't escape IMU's influence. If someone as powerful as Harold couldn't break free, what chance does anyone else have? Which raises another terrifying possibility. How many people throughout history have secretly wanted to oppose IMU, only to spend their entire lives serving him against their own will? If that's true, then the world government isn't just controlling nations, it's controlling people's very existence. And honestly, that's far more terrifying than raw strength. But just when you think this chapter couldn't get any bigger, Oda delivers what might be the most important lore reveal in the entire chapter. We suddenly jump into a flashback involving Loki and none other than red-haired Shanks. Yes, Shanks, the man who somehow appears whenever the story is about to change forever. Loki remembers the day King Harold died, a day surrounded by mystery, a day we've all wanted to know more about. And during that conversation, Shanks tells Loki something absolutely unbelievable. He warns him that the world government is preparing for a massive war. But here's the detail that completely changes everything. Shanks doesn't call the enemy the Five Elders. He doesn't call them the world government. He doesn't even mention the celestial dragons. Instead, he says the enemy is the king of the world. Just let that sink in. Shanks knew. He already knew that someone was sitting above the empty throne. He already knew that IMU existed. And if Shanks knew, how long has he known? Years? Decades? Ever since Roger reached Laugh Tale? Because if Roger discovered the truth about the Void Century, then it's completely possible that Shanks inherited far more than Roger's straw hat. Maybe he also inherited the truth. Suddenly, so many of Shanks' actions begin to make sense. Why did he personally steal the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika? Why did he sacrifice his arm to save Luffy? Why did he meet the 5 elders without fear? Why has he always kept one eye on Blackbeard? Why did he suddenly decide it was finally time to claim the One Piece? Maybe none of these moments were random. Maybe Shanks has been preparing for this exact war since the very beginning. And if that's true, then Shanks isn't simply one of the Yonko anymore. He's one of the greatest masterminds in One Piece history. No wonder fans keep comparing him to Aizen. Every move he makes feels like it was planned years in advance. Back on the battlefield, IMU continues proving why he truly deserves the title, King of the World. Instead of fighting alone, he begins strengthening his own army. Summers receives the terrifying Sword of Wrath to face Zoro, while Killingham is handed the Spear of Holy Command to battle Sanji. Think about how insane this actually is. We've seen powerful villains before. Kaido relied on his overwhelming strength. Big Mom relied on her terrifying devil fruit. Blackbeard steals abilities from others. But IMU commands. He doesn't simply possess overwhelming power. He distributes it. He equips his followers with legendary weapons that once belonged to history itself. That's the difference between a powerful warrior and an actual king. A king doesn't just fight. A king creates an army capable of changing the world, and according to the spoilers, every single one of these weapons once belonged to the 19 kings who founded the world government 8 centuries ago. This reveal is absolutely massive, because it confirms something fans have suspected for years. Those swords surrounding the empty throne weren't symbolic decorations. They were real, ancient, legendary. And now, they're returning to the battlefield one by one. But here's the truly terrifying thought. We've only seen a handful of them. There are still many more left. Imagine the moment when IMU decides to summon every single weapon at once. 19 legendary weapons, all wielded by the same person. If that day comes, it could easily become one of the greatest double-page spreads Oda has ever drawn. And then, Oda gives us the moment everyone will be talking about for the entire week. Luffy can barely stand. His body is covered in wounds. Blood continues pouring from the places where IMU pierced him. There's no smile, no joke, no gear, 5 laughter. For one of the first times in the final saga, Luffy genuinely looks defeated. Then, IMU reaches for yet another weapon, the Xingtian axe. The atmosphere immediately changes. This isn't another attack. This is the finishing blow, the execution, the final strike that could erase Joy Boy's successor forever. For just one terrifying moment. It feels like Oda is actually going to do it. No one is close enough to help. Zoro is occupied. Sanji is occupied. The battlefield is in complete chaos. Luffy is completely exposed. And then, boom! A silhouette suddenly appears between IMU and Luffy. One swing, one block, one legendary entrance, Scopper Gaban. The left hand of the Pirate King has officially entered the battlefield. What an entrance. Seriously, this is exactly why Roger's crew continues to feel so legendary. Years ago, Silver's Rayleigh protected the next generation. He stood against Kizaru to give Luffy a chance to survive. Now, history repeats itself. This time, it's Scopper Gaban standing between death and the future Pirate King. It's almost poetic. Roger may be gone, but his crew still refuses to let the next generation fall. However, before everyone starts celebrating, remember one important detail. Gaban isn't in his prime anymore. He's old, recently injured, still wrapped in bandages. He's stepping in against the single most terrifying enemy we've ever seen. This isn't an easy rescue. This could very well become his final stand. And knowing Oda, don't be surprised if Gaban sacrifices everything to ensure Luffy survives. Because Roger's crew has always believed one thing: the next generation must inherit the future, even if it costs them their lives. Overall, Chapter 1189 accomplishes something that very few chapters in One Piece ever managed to do. It completely shifts the balance of power. IMU no longer feels like a mysterious figure hiding in the shadows. He feels unstoppable. Luffy has never looked this vulnerable. The legendary weapons of the 20 Kingdoms are finally becoming relevant. Shanks' knowledge of the world's greatest secret has been teased once again. The Holy Knights are becoming even stronger. And now Scopper Gaban has officially entered the war. If these spoilers are even half as incredible as they sound, then imagine what Oda is saving for the full chapter. Because one thing has become crystal clear. This isn't just another arc anymore. This is the beginning of the greatest war in One Piece history, and honestly, I don't think we're emotionally prepared for what's coming next. Now I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Scopper Gaban can actually hold off IMU, or is Oda setting us up for another heartbreaking sacrifice before Luffy finally rises again? Drop your theories down in the comments because I will read every single one of them. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want the fastest, most detailed One Piece chapter explanations every single week, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to Talks with Otaku, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. The full chapter drops soon, and trust me, you do not want to miss the complete analysis because Oda is cooking something absolutely legendary. Until then, this is Talks with Otaku, and remember, in the world of One Piece, every tiny detail matters. See you in the next one.